Finally today, 2022 will be remembered as a year that saw some massive wildfires across the region. Wildfires can cause immediate loss, such as valuable forage and soil protecting residue cover. The longer-term effects, though, of wildfire on range and pasture can be varied. However, most rangeland plants are quite resilient, and proper management after a fire can speed up that recovery process. We were fortunate enough to catch up with Oklahoma State University Extension Specialist for Rangeland Ecology, Dr. Laura Goodman, to get her advice when it comes to post-fire grazing.
With an abundance of drought conditions and limited precipitation events, wildfires have been fairly prevalent around Nebraska this summer, and that's meant a lot of lost forage for cattle producers. With that in mind, post-fire grazing was a hot topic at this year's Goodmanson Sandhills Laboratory Open House event. OSU Extension Specialist for Rangeland Ecology, Dr. Laura Goodman, had one take-home message from her presentation that should give some hope to those who have been impacted by these fire events.
My big take-home message, I would say, that is these grasses are very well adapted to grazing and fire. And so, although we have wildfires that happen here, they can recover fairly quickly. It really depends on a couple things. First of all, the management before and after that wildfire, and then also the weather conditions. Do we get rain after that fire for those plants to go ahead and regrow? The longer that you don't get rain and those soils stay exposed, the more likely that you'll have some kind of erosion that's happening, either wind or water erosion. But if it's during a normal year, those grasses can recover really quickly, even within a growing season.
Looking at the immediate aftermath of a wildfire may seem highly discouraging. However, Dr. Goodman tells us following a rangeland fire, odds of recovery are good, and there might even be a slight chance of grazing that land the same year. However, you'll want to cut back on those stocking rates.
With as little rain as has fallen in some places, I'd be reluctant to say go ahead and graze it full blown. So, if you had a lot of people with drought are really trying to hang on to as many cattle as possible, if you really had to graze those pastures, make sure that you're not stocking them normally. You'd want to cut back. But I feel pretty positive, especially after the report on what's going to happen next summer, that if we have normal rain conditions in the next year, everything's going to be back to normal. And if you have good rain after a fire in general, you could probably graze it even within the same year. We do that a lot in our pastures, and it works really, really well in Oklahoma during normal years. So having the right stocking rate that fits your land is really important, and the productivity of your grasses. So figuring out what that stocking rate is and refiguring it every now and then, because sometimes those things can change. I think having an idea of what your productivity is, Extension and NRCS can typically help you with figuring out what your production is. There's also a tool that you could try called the Rangeland Analysis Platform to actually figure out what your stocking rate might be, and it's using satellite imagery to estimate productivity. It's a really excellent tool. It's just a website you can find online, and it's free.
Another thing to keep in mind would be the best way to rotate those animals without the need or cost of utilizing additional fence. One possible alternative would be to use a method called patch burn grazing.
And we know it has many, many benefits for lots of different wildlife species. And so I would recommend looking into that if you're somebody that's interested in using prescribed fire. It also has lots of benefits for your cattle as far as reducing supplementation, higher weight gains for yearlings if you're grazing yearlings. And so just grazing, burning a portion of your pasture, stocking it normally, and allowing those animals to graze immediately following that fire, that also can help with stockpiling. And so, planning for drought is a really important part of managing our land, and that provides you to stockpile in those areas that haven't had a burn recently. So those are things that I would think about. There's a lot of things to manage for in these lands. Woody plant encroachment is something that's happening, and we need to get a handle on it for sure, because it decreases productivity far more than drought or anything else. And so where it's happening. And so we need to come up with management strategies where we really protect the areas that are not converting over to woody encroached areas and keep those as grasslands. So fire is just a really useful tool, so patch burn grazing kind of fits within that.
If grazing is planned on burned areas, grazing management practices like sustainable stocking rates and periodic rest need to be applied to promote strong growth of desired plant communities. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.